There has not been a single point in my 20s where things have gone according to plan. I think that's probably more so reflective of just how life works, and I highly doubt that's all of a sudden going to disappear as I get older. Maybe my life will become more stable, I don't know. I've been in a reflective mood lately, and so I thought I'd share some insights, I guess, realizations that I've had so far in my 20s, expectations versus reality sort of thing. And to help me share some of these insights, I thought I'd draw them out. So there's going to be diagrams that go along with each of the points that I'm trying to make. For those of you that are just listening, I'll describe it verbally. So I think you'll be able to follow along even if you're not watching, but I don't know. I'm a visual learner. These are reflections on my 20s so far as I live through them.
By the way, really quickly, this podcast is brought to you by me. The best ways you can support me growing this project is by signing up to my newsletter, which I'll link down below, liking or reviewing the podcast episodes, or literally just telling a friend to check it out. Word of mouth is huge. All right, let's dive in.
So the first major point I wanted to make is that projections into the future don't seem to ever work. They're not accurate. And I don't know if this has to do with me being a poor forecaster of the future, of my future, or if it has more to do with the fact that this is just a volatile period of life. I guess time will tell. But one of the biggest things that I have come to learn about myself is that future projections are inaccurate, very inaccurate. What do I mean by this? Well, at the age of 20, 21 years old, I definitely felt way behind a lot of my peers. I made the decision not to go to university. I was trying to carve my own path in the film industry, working freelance jobs and whatnot. That's my own unique path, if you will. But a few really interesting things have happened over the last 5 years. The difference between age 21 and 23 is pretty remarkable. If I had to project my future 2 years in the future at that point, at the age of 21, I think I would have guessed moderate growth, moderate career advancement. And what ended up happening, thanks to a whole bunch of different factors, luck is definitely a part of it. A lot of hard work, but a lot of luck, a lot of timing, is that, my YouTube channel took off. It opened a ton of doors for me, and I ended up actually accomplishing way more than I thought I would between the ages of 21 and 23.
An important piece of context to take into consideration is that definitely I feel incredibly fortunate about the timing of things, especially looking back in hindsight. But this did come after an entire decade of me already worrying so much about my career, feeling behind, feeling lost. I was weird in that way, in that I was thinking about these things very early on.
However, what's really interesting is as you get older, you get more data points. And, I thought I was kind of figuring things out at the age of 23. Not really. Turns out not really. Had I projected at age 23 where I would be at age 25 right now, I think I would have kind of continued the trend that was in place, right? I would have shot sort of for the moon. And that's not really how the last couple of years have gone. Growth from a numerical standpoint, especially on like social media and whatnot, is nonlinear. And things in many ways they've continued to grow, and that's really cool, but not at the pace that they did before. And so, once again, my projections would have been off. I think I would have been further along based off of how things went between the ages of 21 and 23.
It does feel like after the age of 23, there was a major increase in the number of projects that I had to basically quit on. I had to bail because they weren't working, because they didn't feel right, because I was over ambitious. I got a giant serving of humble pie. There are a couple of really interesting things that I think are actually not captured at all in the graphic that I drew out here. So this is a good exercise for me too. The first is that definitions of success change. I look back on what I thought was success from the ages of 21 to 23, and I see a completely unsustainable lifestyle. I see myself not really listening to my body when I was tired or worn out. I also feel like as time goes on, my standards keep going up.
It's not really that useful to project too much into the future. You cannot predict what life is going to throw your way or how things are going to go. You can't time when a project is going to connect with a lot of people or if it ever will. For me, this has been very humbling too. How quick I was to go from a lot of self-doubt, a lot of, gosh, is this ever going to work? Am I ever going to be able to have an impact? To feeling pretty invincible, feeling myself, you know what I mean? Feeling my shit, and then kind of falling back to earth a little bit. Another giant takeaway of mine from the last 5 years, from my life in general, is that as you accumulate more experience, more data points, you're basically around on this earth to witness more things happen. It's kind of like if you hang around long enough, you'll see certain trends come and go. I'm seeing that more and more consistently as I get older. And I think this relates to trajectory and where you end up in life, because like, cool, you might have a really great year, but that doesn't necessarily predict anything for the future. And conversely, you might have had a really rough year, and that really doesn't tell you anything about the successes you might have down the road. It kind of goes both ways. Okay, the second graphic that I made here is to represent a trend that I've been noticing as I get older. If the first graphic was called predicting your trajectory, the second graphic would be predicting bandwidth. And what I've come to realize is that as I get older, I keep miscalculating what I'm capable of doing. And I think this is because predicting bandwidth is very tricky. It has to do with a lot of factors. I think it has to do with temperament. I'm somebody that really just gets excited about projects and diving into things. And so I'm a pro at miscalculating how much bandwidth I'm going to need for things. But the larger trend in my life is that it becomes more difficult to have bandwidth available for things because you, once again, have been around long enough to start a bunch of projects and to do a bunch of different things, right? And you kind of go through life accumulating. Now I have more friends than I used to have. And that's a priority for me in my life to maintain and whatnot, right? So energy and time and attention goes towards that. And it didn't in the past because I didn't have that. And so I'm kind of noticing a decrease, generally speaking, in terms of the bandwidth that I have available as I get older. And that's me as a 25-year-old with, no wife, no children. I can understand now why people right around the age of 30 or 35, they have to confront certain very difficult realities, right? Because if you have a family, and I'd like to have a family someday, that's like dropping a bomb on your bandwidth. That being said, bandwidth is not linear. It's not like a linear trend that's taking place here. I do have control over this. And what I've noticed is that if I make a conscious effort, I can liberate quite a bit of bandwidth again. It's just that if I'm not conscious of this, if I just let life happen and move more so with the momentum of things, that the general trend is for bandwidth to be eaten up by things. So I thought that was an important one to mention because I've just been thinking about it a lot, and I think awareness about this kind of thing has a big impact on your life. The third graphic, the third idea I want to share here is something I'm going to call my self-knowledge trends in my 20s. And this is another expectations versus reality kind of thing. So at the age of 20, if I were to answer the question, how well do you know yourself? How much do you think you know what you want in life? I think I would have answered something like, 70, 80%. Like there's room to learn new things, but I've got a pretty good sense of myself. And in hindsight, my answer for 20-year-old me would be something more along the lines of like 5%. There's just so much stuff that I thought I knew that I didn't know, or that I thought I wanted and that I didn't ultimately end up wanting. And then like 3 years later, age 23, given the same question, I think I would have answered something like 50%. I know myself 50%. I know what I want and what I like, maybe 50%. And in hindsight, I'd say that number might have gone up slightly, but it's still nowhere near 50%. And maybe it was like 7%. My point here is that I think self-knowledge does increase as you age, but simultaneously, you become aware of how much you don't know. I was wrong about so many more things than I thought I would be by this stage. And then another challenge is that what you care about and what you want out of life changes. It doesn't stay the same. And that kind of acts like inflation for self-knowledge. So each year, that's like a force that's working against that percentage of self-knowledge that you have, because you're letting go of old ideas that used to be true for yourself. I used to like working in a certain way, or I used to like doing certain things that I don't anymore. So I'd say the trend here is, there's several trends. One is you become more realistic about how much you know yourself. Like that percentage goes down. And then the amount that you actually do know yourself does increase, I think. Or it has for me, at least, simply because I'm gathering so many more data points. I've had so many more experiences that have been essentially chances for me to reflect on what I do and do not care about. So that's cool. I mean, I hope this is a trend that continues throughout the rest of my life. There isn't a cell in my body that thinks I'll ever hit 100%, but maybe when I'm 60, 65, I can have a stronger sense of self-knowledge than I do today. That would be nice. I think that's the trend that I'm on right now. Okay, the final idea or graphic that I wanted to share is the expectations versus reality of volatility in my life. And I think that there's this really strong narrative that, you figure out what you want to do, and then you kind of like specialize in that, and you get better at it, and then you kind of solidify in that career or in that direction, and volatility goes down over time. So my expectation was that as I get older, the volatility of my life seriously decreases. Maybe not in a straight line, but just in general that it goes down. It does not feel like that's what's been happening. I'm not entirely sure volatility has gone down whatsoever. It really depends on a year-by-year basis. I mean, last year might have been the most volatile year of my life. And again, I don't know, this probably has a fair amount to do with my own temperament and my own approach to life, right? But I personally get a sense that volatility is not the kind of thing that just disappears, especially in a world that is getting noisier and more chaotic and with so many things changing. There's so much disruption taking place. At this point, it's very hard for me to imagine ever having a stable job, a stable source of income. And I can put labels on that and call it a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what it is. And understanding that volatility is a part of life, I feel like just wrapping my brain around that helps. I think I spent a lot of time really hoping for the volatility in my life to go down just because I felt overwhelmed or stressed out or whatever. But making friends with that, making friends with being an emotional creature, being friends with the sudden changes and the uncertainty inherent in life, I think there's a kind of peace that comes with that. It doesn't get rid of the volatility, but maybe it makes you more resilient. Anyway, I wanted to test out this format because I thought it'd be really cool to draw out some of these very abstract ideas I have about aging, about getting older. And so if you like this, please let me know. And I can turn this into a more regular thing. I can take things I'm noticing in my life and turn them more often into visuals and explain them in this way. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.